It's the hour of the Beastie again, and welcome to the Beastie O'Clock show, where in each show we'll be delving into the latest Wee Beastie offering from Harviestoun, and we'll be giving you the details of where you're able to catch a taste of these exclusive releases. Joining me from the bottom of a cask full of beer-soaked fruit is my co-host and all-round Beastie bearded beery bloke, Mark. Hello, Mark.
Hello, Steve. How are you, mate?
I'm good, thanks, mate. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm not too bad, thanks.
Okay, Mark, what are we up to this week on the Wee Beastie show?
It's not quite a Wee Beastie show this week. It's a Big Beastie show because we're getting 3-4 beers tonight. So one of which people will be too familiar with already, I'm sure, which is Bitter and Twisted. One of, if not the core beer in Harviestoun's range. And in addition to that, we have 3 variations of it, all matured, I guess, in Thistley Cross cider barrels, but some of them matured with plums, some with Scottish raspberries, and the other one just in the cider barrels. And we got an interview right now that we recorded at the launch event for Wee Beastie with Amy, who's the head brewer from Harviestoun, all about the whole Thistley Cross cider barrel bitter and twisted combination. So let's have a listen to that.
So we're with Amy from Harviestoun Brewery. Welcome, Amy.
Hi there.
How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you.
We're at the kind of launch of the Wee Beastie series tonight.
Yeah, we are. It's gone really well.
And this week we've been drinking the variations of Bitter and Twisted, which you've been playing with. Tell us what you've done with the beers.
So we approached Thistley Cross Cider to try and do some form of collaboration with them. And we came to the agreement that they were going to supply us with some of their cider yeast, and we were going to ferment Bitter and Twisted with it. This kind of grew a little bit of arms and legs, and we decided to convert some of the used barrels that we've used previously to age beer in. We converted them into fermenters. So we actually fermented Bitter and Twisted in wooden barrels using a cider yeast.
Okay, so we've got 3 variations of it. We've got,
yes,
according to the bottles that we've got, that are white label stuff.
Yeah.
We've got one that's called Control,
yes,
and then we've got one that's been aged on Scottish raspberries, and then there's one that's been aged on plums.
Yeah. So
tell us the difference between the 3.
So the Control is basically just Bitter and Twisted fermented in the barrels using Thistley Cross yeast. So it's the base beer that we created. When we tried it originally, it smells like a beer and tastes like a cider. It was a bit of a mind blow because we didn't really know where to put it. So we thought, oh right, well what can we do with these? So we started playing with fruits. So we started to mature some of it with some plums, and then we got some Scottish raspberries and matured another section with those. And we just left them to mature for a couple of months just to allow the flavours to develop, see what happened. And we ended up with 3 really unique and interesting products. The raspberry comes out really prominent in the beer. As I said before, it smells like a beer and then drinks like a raspberry cider. It's completely unique in itself. The plum is a lot more mellow. It's got a lot more of a rounded characteristic, and it's much more sessionable than the other 2 versions. So all in all, it was a success, and it was a completely new experiment for us. We'd never done it before, but we've created something very unique, and we just hope people like them and enjoy them.
What was the reasoning behind using Bitter and Twisted for it rather than any of the other beers?
I think, like the Schiehallion, it already has quite a dry characteristic. So if we went down that route, we could end up with more of a cider character than anything, that dry, really sharp character. We didn't want to use our dark beer. We've used that for other experiments that we've been doing. So Bitter and Twisted really fitted well because it's got it's a really moreish, rounded character, and we thought, against the cider yeast, hopefully it wouldn't drag it too down and make it too dry. We'd keep some of the beer character there, but still impart from the cider side. So.
And what do you think it adds to Bitter and Twisted?
it creates a really nice sharp character when you're drinking it. As I said, it almost drinks more like a cider, but you can still tell it's a beer. It just creates a new element for it. You know, it's gave it a little lease of life, maybe, shall we say. It's changed it into something totally different.
And looking forward to next year, you're going to have some fun experimenting with these Wee Beastie variations.
Yeah, definitely.
Can you give us an idea of some of the beers that are going to be coming up?
Yeah, we've got kind of a few ideas in the pipeline. We're playing around a bit with some sour mash. We're trying to create a super hoppy IPA. We've got some ideas to try and create maybe a nice red rye, possibly. We also have a kind of desire to try and create what we want to class as a white stout. So something that's got the body and the fullness and the character of a traditional stout, but not the colour. So we're going to play about and see if we can create something along those lines. So we've got a few ideas there. Just have to watch out for the Wee Beastie. See what appears.
Okay, so Amy's telling us there about how these beers came about. Why are we doing bitter and twisted as well, though, mate?
Bitter and Twisted is kind of like the base beer for all of these, so we're having something that we can refer all the other versions to. Because it's all well and good saying, oh, well, this tastes great, it's Thistley Cross cider and all that, and plums and then raspberries. But because it's based on Bitter and Twisted, we want to have a reference point that we can refer back to.
Okay, so should we get into the bitter and twisted? It's a beer that we've never done on the original show, have we? We've spoke about it fondly a number of times, but we've never actually reviewed it as a beer.
No, I think in season 1, when we used to do our little personal assignments, I think I may have done it once, or you may have. I can't quite remember, but we have mentioned it before. But yeah, like you say, it's never been a featured beer.
Okay, so this is a bit of a first for us as well then. So, as we say, Bitter and Twisted isn't part of the Wee Beastie series, but for us tonight, we're just going to do this so that we've got a comparison to the Wee Beastie beers that we're going to be doing. That's a mouthful to try and get out every time. Look at the pour on that. It's lovely and golden. It's light. It's refreshing. It's got a lovely refreshing aroma to it as well. Yep,
nice medium carbonation. Lovely goldeny straw colour. Slight head. It's a solid beer, this, and it's one that most people I know who drink Harviestoun beers love Bitter and Twisted.
It's a solid beer, as you say. I mean, this is it's for me. It's one of those beers that was kind of one of my entry points into the beers that I drink now. So it's got a very special place in my heart. Bitter and Twisted as. Okay, so what are you getting on the flavours, mate?
Getting slight biscuity, toasty malts. Actually quite a lemony zest across the top for me. Very slight bittering on the end, but I mean, it's a solid ale. It's not too overly hopped, not too overly malted. Lovely lemon cutting through it. It's just a really refreshing, nice little, what's essentially a golden ale, really, without being too golden.
Yeah, it's a great summary, mate. 4.2%, a real summer guzzler, Bitter and Twisted is. Right, let's get silly, shall we?
All right.
First one up tonight. This one's simply called Harviestoun Brewery and Thistley Cross Cider, the original, at a mere 11% ABV.
And this is, as with the others, bottle conditioned as well.
It is indeed, yes. Interesting aroma on that, mate.
Yeah, you're really getting the cider straight away off that.
Yeah, that's really coming through, isn't it?
And that slightly vinous smell that you would imagine from an aged beer as well.
Yeah, interestingly, I don't know about you, hardly any carbonation on the one that I've just poured here.
No, this is proper still, this is.
Yeah.
Very, very, very faint bubbling that you would expect after having poured out a beer. And it's just, it's settling.
Right, now, I'm a little bit worried here. Me and cider don't get on well. We've got a checkered history. We've fallen out on many occasions. And I'm worried that it smells more like a cider than a beer. But should we give this a try and see what they've done to Old Faithful?
Well, you say that it smells like a cider. I'm actually picking up more of a yeasty note from it, like almost like a wheat beer.
Yeah, and I think in the interview earlier on, Amy was talking about them using some of the cider yeasts as well in the beer as well as the barrels.
Yeah. Anyway, let's get into it, mate. Let's give it a go.
Cheers. Almost has no resemblance to the original.
No.
Whatsoever. You can't even pick up a hint of what might have once been bitter and twisted in there.
Yeah, you're picking up that yeast. It's very sweet. But
It's incredibly sweet.
I dare say it's not cidery sweet, though. For me, it is kind of Belgian-y, almost. You're getting... It's floral, faintly fruity. I've never tasted Thistley Cross cider, so I don't know what that tastes like. But I'm assuming that's an apple cider, right?
I believe so. They're a brand that seem to appear at a lot of the craft beer festivals. They seem to be a regular appearance or appearee there now. It's almost, the aroma's almost sour like. It's almost like you get from a sour beer.
Mm-hmm.
The flavour's really warming. It's really, really sweet. It's maybe a little bit too sweet for my palate. I've got to say I'm not really enjoying this.
Yeah, the mouthfeel is slightly sticky. It's much thicker than the base bitter and twisted. Very, very slight hint of apple coming through. I am getting like that floral, fruity, yeasty flavours coming through. Like you say, it's like a sour beer. It's not quite on that heavy Belgian side of things.
Yeah, it's not blowing me away, this one. I've got to say. Some interesting flavours going on in there. So, if you do come across this beer, give it a try. It's a big ABV, though, 11% to be just giving something a try at 11%. Yeah. Let's move on to the other two, mate, because these ones have been aged. One's been aged on raspberries and one's been aged on plums. So which ones do you fancy trying first?
Well, they're both the same ABV. They're both 10.5.
Yeah.
So I think if we leave plums till last, because I'm imagining that the raspberry one is going to be slightly crisper and a little bit lighter on the palate, but we'll see. But going back to this, what they've called the control Thistley Cross, for 11%, it's not overbearingly strong for an 11% beer. I don't think.
No, it's just that cloying, sticky sweetness that I just think would become overbearing a little bit.
I do think that stickiness on the palate, that almost syrupiness, is you couldn't get through bottle upon bottle of it. It's a dessert beer almost.
Yes, yeah, very much so. Good shout. It is a dessert beer. You could serve that after a meal. Okay, so this one for me, I've got a lot more carbonation in the raspberry one. Mm-hmm. It's interestingly, I'm just comparing the two, and it's a much darker colour than the original. So it's obviously picked up some of the colour from the raspberries as well. This one has been matured with Scottish raspberries. Let's point that out as well. Not any old raspberries, Scottish ones. Not quite so appley and sweet on the aroma. This one actually smells a little bit more like a beer.
Yeah, and I'm picking up that sweet berryness from it on the nose as well. Almost like fruit cough syrup for me.
Yeah,
but not in a cough syrup way.
Well, let's see what it tastes like, mate. Cheers.
Okay, cheers. Okay, straight away getting the raspberries from that.
Yeah.
It doesn't have that cloying syrup mouthfeel that the previous one did. I think the slight additional carbonation has kind of helped to cut through that. It's not that much weaker than the other one. It's only a 0.5% ABV weaker than the Control Thistley Cross. That raspberry isn't overbearing. It's kind of adding a nice little accent to the base beer, I think.
I think it softens it. I think the raspberry flavouring softens the harshness and the sweetness that was coming through, and it almost brings it back to. And I'm just going to go back and just try a sip of the original. It's beginning to bring it back a little bit to the original there. There's a little bit more of the malts going on in there, and like I said, I just think that addition of the raspberries seems to have done a lot to this beer. This one very much in its favour.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and raspberries been quite, they're a very sweet berry. They're not a terribly heavy berry, and that is allowing for that biscuity base from the very base beer to come through a bit more, whereas the Control Thistley Cross, I think the style that it is, or the syrupness kind of overbore the malt a little bit, so you didn't get that nice biscuity base coming through. Whereas this one, the raspberry really does help control things a little bit. It's a little bit more balance. For me, it's more palatable.
Yeah, it is quite a tart fruit, though, isn't it? The raspberry. I know I've had quite a few raspberry sours in the last year or so, and they do make a really kind of tart, sharp beer. But they just seem to have had almost the opposite effect on this one, and they've softened it a little bit, and that really works for me. I really like the raspberry one. I'm interested to try the plum one now as well, see what that's like. So let's dig into that one,
okay.
And have a see what we've got here.
Sure.
So I'm expecting it again to be a little bit darker, because plum's quite a dark fruit.
There it is. Let's crack it open.
Oh, and it is. Now, we're moving on here. We've got an almost dark golden amber colour to it now, which is almost gone down a shading colour from the raspberry one, and is almost unrecognisable to the Control version as well.
Yeah, it's getting even more coppery. So we started off with the Control and the Bitter and Twisted were a similar shade, which is that lovely kind of golden straw. The raspberry had, when you tilted the glass, you could see like a haze of pink, but that may have been my imagination. Just imagining the plum. But this one, it's getting to more of a copper, about as active as the raspberry, or maybe slightly more carbonated. Oh, but thick plum coming through on the nose.
Yeah, there's that sweetness in there again, isn't there, of the fruit?
Yeah. The lovely thick fruitiness that I've gotten from some barley wines before.
Yes, yeah, good shout, mate. Right, let's give this one a try then.
Right.
So once again, cheers.
We're powering through these beers.
Absolutely.
Okay, straight away that plum is taking over the entire of my sinus cavities. That aroma is just flowing through my head.
You know what? It's got a bit more of a bite to the finish,
mm-hmm.
and it's got a finish on it for me that's very, very reminiscent of a red wine. Kind of the tartness and that you get from a red wine. That's again really enjoyable. The fruit seems to have added a lot to that version of it.
Yeah, similar to the Control one, I think this would be a great dessert beer.
Yep, I think it's fair to say that none of them resemble the original whatsoever. So, Bitter and Twisted at 4.2% is, it's a blonde beer. It's a good, solid beer. These three variations are nothing like it. They bear no resemblance whatsoever to the original beer. But each of them have got something very, very different about them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this one I would happily have alongside a nice slice of chocolate gâteau or black forest cake. Something that has like that nice jammy sauce coming through the chocolate cake. The control I would have, I think, alongside perhaps some rich cheeses. I think it would be quite well paired with that. The raspberry one I'd just drink by itself. I think that's a really nicely well balanced. You can't tell it's 10.5% at all.
Yeah.
It doesn't hold its hand up to being a strong beer at all, which is a little bit dangerous. This one, it's carrying through the strength that we have from the control Thistley Cross, but that plum kind of, again, like the raspberry, balances it out a little bit. And you don't get much of the malt biscuity toastiness coming through at all from it.
No, it's like it has completely changed the original beer. For me, I wouldn't choose to drink the original version of it, the control version. I don't like it. That's not for my palate. I think you were spot on with the raspberry one. That's one that you could easily sit in the garden in the summer and you could just sup away at that and you could enjoy that just on its own. Mm-hmm. For me, though, the plum one, because of the flavours that I'm getting with it, I think that would work really well with a well-cooked steak. I just think that the flavours would just pair really well. There's for me, like I say, there's that almost a hint of a feel of red wine coming through on the end. It's a little bit of plum jam in there as well, which is really nice. I'm torn between the raspberry and the plum version as to which of the three I'm most keen on here.
Yeah, personally, I'm going to go with the raspberry because I think it doesn't. It stands on its own, but in a way that it doesn't demand attention. Whereas if you are having the plum with something, it would kind of be, you would have to balance it with something, like you say, like a steak, or for me, a piece of black forest cake, something that complements it. But because it's quite a bold beer, and yeah, again, like you, the control, the original, I wouldn't go back to that at all. It is very much you want a third or less of it to go with something. Yeah. But it is so cloying and so sticky. But this one, I mean, the plum, it just reminds me of a really nice, like a French barley wine that I've had before. That plumness comes over really nicely and it's really smooth through it. But the winner for me is the raspberry, because again, it's not battling for anything. It knows what it is.
Yeah. Okay, and we're obviously lucky enough to have been sent these beers by Harviestoun, which we're very, very grateful for. So we're getting an exclusive taste of these on the show here. But the next event's coming up in London, where you can go along to and you can try some of the Wee Beastie series. That's on Thursday the 19th of March at the Elgin. Full details and a link to where you can buy tickets are in the show notes. And make sure you check out Justin Mason's latest blog as well over on masonjust.blogspot.com, because Justin's also tasting these beers with us and he's coming along on the ride and using his amazing palate to pull out some flavours that you and I will miss. So, Mark, what's coming up on the next Beastie O'Clock show?
Well, as we've mentioned before, these are being driven by when Harviestoun actually releases the beers. Now, they've released quite a few up front for us just to get the things rolling, because they had obviously the launch at Craft Beer Rising and they've got the next event on the 19th of March. After that, we don't yet know what the schedule is for the next release. It's quite exciting. We're looking forward to seeing what they come out with next. So I would imagine probably in 3 or 4 weeks we might have another episode pop up. So just keep your eye out. It's all coming through on the same feed as the Beer O'Clock show. Okay, well, great stuff. Mark, it's been an absolute pleasure. It's been the highlight of my weekend. Nicely done. And so just make sure to check into the next episode of Beastie O'Clock Show, coming out in a few weeks, as Mark says, at the Wee Beastie Hour.